talked earlier. Matter of fact, I talked about it yesterday when you weren't with us about Urban laying down the law this week, and I really thought that was important, not for just the general, well, you don't want to get into a fight, but knowing that this year you may have more additional games, more additional opportunities here. The last thing you need is to be compromised with guys and then end up in the playoff.
Yeah, that's true, and that was important. Obviously, reacting to last year's ejection of Marcus Hall and his subsequent suspension, very important because it's easy to predict Michigan players trying to bait the Buckeyes into that kind of behavior, and really that's what it was last year when 4 or 5 guys formed a circle around a downed Buckeye on a kickoff return and were taunting and jabbering at him and instigated some pushing and shoving, resulting in the Marcus Hall ejection. So yeah, it was clearly something that was provoked, but you just can't allow yourself to be provoked like that because the games you've got after this one are even more important than this one, if that's not sacrilege to say.
No, it absolutely is, And what you brought up, Larry mentioned it yesterday when he called in. Same thing you said, and you know that when you get, even if the Wolverines come into this game fired up and thinking that they can win, if the game doesn't go your way, then yeah, it's very quickly you drag it into the muck. And the other thing, outside of worrying about future repercussions that I mentioned yesterday, is you're not going to match points. Well, even though we know what they did last year, odds are this Michigan squad is not going to match score for score with the Buckeyes if the Buckeyes are hitting on all offensive cylinders like they have been most of this season. So what do? You slow a team down, and the quickest way to do it is to take it into the muck, and is to slow the game down, is to get some people ejected, get tempers flaring, not even to get them ejected, but to get them out of their game, to get them not focused or whatever. That's like I always say, number one never takes cheap shots at number two. Number two lives to take cheap shots at number one because sometimes that's your only option.
Yeah, that's true. And your point is well made that Michigan's unlikely to score 41 points this year like they did last year. The trajectory of the Ohio State defense is going in the opposite direction this year. Last year, the defense seemed to get worse as the season went along, and they had maybe their worst performance of the year, which is quite saying something, against Michigan when they were just shredded through the air mostly. This year, the defense has gotten improved as the season's gone along. Now, they have faced some really fine running backs over the last few weeks, and Cobb and Coleman and Humphrey. And Michigan has no such player on their roster, and so you'd like to think that they're not going to get gashed for 90-yard touchdown runs by anybody coming out of the Michigan backfield. Devin Gardner, of course, has the potential to be that guy, to break a long one against you. But the Buckeye defense in general has been improving as opposed to, regressing over the course of the year. And I just, there's no possible way, I don't think, that Michigan's going to come into Ohio Stadium and put 40 on the board. The Buckeyes, on the other hand, are fully capable of putting 40 on the board or more, although I don't really see that happening this time around, as I mentioned on Monday. I think the 20-point spot's probably too many, just based on the history of the series. And it is senior day, and it is all those things that the Michigan game normally is. They're playing at home. There clearly is a talent discrepancy between the two teams this year, and you've got to believe, as I said Monday, that the body language of the Michigan Wolverines losing to Maryland at home last week showed me a team that looked like they were about ready to quit and go home. But I don't think the Michigan coaching staff will allow them to mail this one in. They'll be out there giving their best, and there's a bunch of Ohio kids on that team that have something to prove, and I think they'll show up obviously and play hard, and then it'll be a closer game than that 3-touchdown spread.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. I would get into the whole maybe fighting for your coach, fighting for your pride, and all of that if it wasn't for the way they played last week. If they were, even with the whole season, if they come, you go, wow, well, they were clearly getting ready for OSU week or something, but they didn't. And Urban Meyer even talked about, he said, hey, It doesn't mean that they won't get fired up. I do believe you do. I was here. I saw that happen. He mentioned his time with Earl Bruce when he was out after the Michigan game and how the players came. You brought it up Monday with the name on the headbands and all of that and wanting to win one for their coach. I don't feel that here with this Wolverines team, which is really they're the definition of 500. There are points scored, points against. It's all right down the middle, 20 points. Everything's kind of just blah about this Michigan team. So I just don't feel that win one for the Gipper spirit. I'm not in the locker room. We could be wrong about that, but it just doesn't seem to the eye that that's the way they're coming into this game.
That's true, and I see the same thing. You see their best defensive player, Frank Clark, just recently bounced off the team for his criminality, and that's another, shit on the board that says, Michigan's not going to be in this football game. But, some of the guys on some of the forums and boards that I frequent about Buckeye lore and Buckeye history, all the discussion this week, as usual, is about, what are some of your favorite memories from Buckeye OSU Michigan games, and going back and talking about everything from Troy Smith's pass to Gonzalez in 2005 and Todd Bell scoring off a block punt in 1979 and just all the, Mo Claret on the wheel route and taking the option pitch for the game-winning touchdown, all those memories. It's had me going back even this morning and yesterday back to YouTube and back to looking at highlights. And the thing that jumps out at me from all the OSU Michigan highlights, excuse me, is just how jacked up both teams are. That's, you can notice it right away. The kids flying around, the kids just emotionally at a fever pitch. And that's one thing that happens every single year, and you sometimes forget about it until the teams actually get on the field and you see the emotion and the players. It's just unlike any other game, and that's why it's so unpredictable. That's why it typically is closer than sometimes it has any right to be. And you've just got kids, emotionally at a very high level, and that's what makes it so darn cool.
Yep, you got that right. And that's why no matter what we talk about here, let's see what happens when they hit the field. You mentioned something. This was kind of where I wanted to go. Looking at them, my question for you was going to be, instead of going position by position and all of that, I'm kind of with you. What scares you, or what if you're the Buckeyes, if this week, what are you circling, besides do your job, of course, but what are you going, hey, you can't let this or that or this beat you? And I don't find a whole lot of that. Like you said, you've got Gardner, he's been okay. I thought he regressed from last season, but I mean, what do you have weapon-wise there that they're going to try to keep up with the Buckeyes with? I mean, that's kind of another place that I'm having trouble looking at this squad. As I said, they're averaging about 20 points a game, and the way they played last week, there's just, to me, even if they come fired up, where are they going to attack? And this is a serious question. Where will they be attacking the Buckeyes from?
Well, I think they're going to try to get the ball out to guys like Funchess, and this morning I actually went back and looked because I could not name a Michigan receiver other than Devon Funchess, and that troubled me. But it also says something about what you're talking about, the weapons that they have or don't have. On the outside, they have a kid named Norfleet. I recalled after I saw his name, and they have a couple of other kids. They do not have big weapons on the outside, but that they're going to have to try to. First of all, they're going to have to try to run the ball. They lost Eric Greener. He got demoted. They've been running this Devon Smith, an Ohio kid, as their principal running back. They've had some injuries there, Fitzgerald, Toussaint, and others. But there's not a lot that scares you. The thing that scares me is Devin Gardner's legs, getting out of the pocket,
yes.
Running quarterback draws, and Buckeyes haven't been the greatest tackling team in the world, and they have had some lapses in the running attack, and so that's one thing that gives me pause. But I think the thing that the Buckeyes need to be aware of, I mean, you don't want the 3 turnovers per game to become a trend. It's already happened now 2 games in a row, Minnesota and then last week Indiana, where the Buckeyes' biggest enemy was themselves and shooting holes in their feet, and that's what they've got to avoid that. I mean, to me, that's the only way that Michigan can come in and win is if the Buckeyes turn the ball over, give them short fields, give them points off turnovers. So that would be the focus if I'm Urban Meyer. That's the thing that I'm telling my team is that, we just simply can't let that happen. Take care of the football. He preaches it constantly, and what head coach doesn't. But that's the thing that 2 games in a row is, the beginning of a trend, and you want to just nip that right in the bud because you can't keep doing it going forward.
No, for sure. Outside of that, defensively, what do the Wolverines bring here to try to slow down J.T. Barrett, this record-setting offense that we've seen? You talk about, how both teams came in, as you mentioned, a couple. See, I look at it differently. A couple than some people. The last few weeks, good challenges to me in various ways. Like even last week, we knew going in. It's like what we just said about weapons. We knew. We talked about Coleman. We said, man, if that's where they're gonna get some success, and if he gets going, and sure enough, he single-handedly kept them in the game for a while, which really speaks to what he brings to the table. But yeah, I wasn't finding that guy. Meanwhile, we know the Bucs offense has tons of that guy. We just mentioned J.T. Barrett and what he's doing, and we can go on down through the list. How do the Wolverines attempt to stop that offense of the Buckeyes?
Well, the one thing I think that you look at it when you look at the Michigan defense is that they have fairly good linebacker play. They have Jake Ryan, a kid out of St. Ignatius. They have James Ross, a young linebacker that's really been playing pretty well for him. Desmond Morgan, and not a bad player. So they've got some guys in the linebacking core that can and do a fairly decent job of stopping the run. Now, they did not do a whole lot of that last week when it really counted because Maryland took the ball with about 7 or 8 minutes to go and just ground it on the ground and really just kind of punished and humiliated the Wolverines going down the stretch and using up the clock and preserving their lead. So, but on balance, if you look at the Wolverines over the course of the year, they have been getting decent play out of their linebacking group, Ross and Ryan especially. And those kids can play. They also have a kid from Hudson named Bolden, I believe is his name, who is a nice young player and a good run stuffer. So they're going to have to do that, and they're going to have to rely on putting the Buckeyes in third and long and hoping they can get some pass rush, even without a Frank Clark coming off the end. So I frankly don't see a Michigan level of talent on the defensive side of the ball, really on either side of the ball. I think the only thing that's going to keep the Wolverines in this game is if they can bring a ratcheted up emotional level, and if they can force some turnovers and score some points off of them. Even still, I just have watched too many OSU Michigan games to predict a blowout. And the Buckeyes blew them out in 08. It was 42-7 or 42-9 or something like that, 37-7 in 2010. So when they get them lately, when they get them at Ohio Stadium, and they've won 5 straight in Ohio Stadium over Michigan, they can put some beatings on them, and they have done that since Michigan's been down the last few years. Of course, the Buckeyes have only lost 2 of the last 12 to Michigan, and one of them was in 2011 when Braxton Miller was a freshman, and the team was in disarray and playing a .500 season, and even at that, we lost 40-34, and Braxton Miller overthrew a couple of wide open receivers for what would have been touchdowns, and probably would have won the game for us. But the only other loss is 04, and going back a dozen years. So obviously Tressel was 9-1 against them, and Urban Meyer is now 2-0. So that loss in 11 when the Buckeyes are in transition represents the only chink in the armor in the last decade. So you got to be confident predicting an OSU win at home. But I will say this, and there was a little bit of history that I was looking up today, that Michigan has knocked Ohio State out of the title picture, national championship chase 3 times just in the last, I think since 1996. They have ruined perfect Big Ten seasons for Ohio State 11 times, and that's enough reason right there to give you a pause about making any predictions. Now, Ohio State is, they have, I think, 5 times Michigan has ruined Ohio State perfect seasons. That isn't obviously on the table this year, but 11 times the Buckeyes have been undefeated in Big Ten play going in this game and have lost. So that is one of the streaks that they've got going on. And I got to mention, too, Ohio State's trying to extend several other streaks. Obviously, a record 23 straight Big Ten regular season games is again on the line. They set a record every week with every win since they broke the record of 20. And of course,